Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Jay Kirby here with the Kirbside Network, and joining me tonight is an author bringing a very interesting story, a little bit of slice of life, a little bit of sci-fi to the world. Mr. Benjamin Hunting, thank you, Benjamin, for joining me tonight.
Thanks
Um,
for having me on.
yeah, no problem at all. But as always, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, follow our Twitch. Right now, we are doing Astromore, our D&D and space adventure, every Friday night on Twitch. Uh, we also go live on our YouTube channel and live on our Facebook. So go follow all our social media so you never miss out on any of our events. And also coming up in only about 2 weeks as of the time of recording on September 28th, we will be at FateCon in Arlington, Texas. Do not miss out. We were there last year as guests. This year we're there as a Q&A panel. So we're moving up in the world. But FateCon's an excellent little D&D convention. The Fates are wonderful people and put on a great show last year. Can't wait for this year. As always, none of this can be brought to you without our partners, without our sponsors. Collected Comics and Games here in the Dallas Fort Worth area. Uh, Collected has their two locations here in the DFW. They have everything, like everything that you can see on this shelf. Most of it I got from Collected. Funkos, books up here, some D&D books, minis, anything your nerdy little heart desires, Collected has for you. So go check them out. Let them know that Curbside sent you, and they will treat you just right. Also, shout out to our official merch team, Peach City Inc. They have 100% custom designs, pre-washed, pre-shrunk t-shirts. They're extremely comfortable. Considering our latest D&D adventure, I love their newest design. My dice don't jiggle, they roll. Um, but they are our official merch team, so go check out Peach State Inc. on Facebook, and they will get you some of the best custom merch out there. And of course, because I can't host a D&D game on Sundays or on Fridays, and I can't play D&D on Sundays with my friends if I don't have dice. So shout out to our official dice sponsor, ST-Way Gaming. Jason and his family have worked tirelessly, especially having a new baby, to bring you some of the best dice out there. They are absolutely chocked full of some of the best designs, some of the best feeling dice that I own. I think I have, yeah, I got a pair right here. Um, I rock these every now and again. Excellent color that Jason sent me. Uh, he's got dice, he's got accessories, he's got hats, shirts, necklaces. So go check out ST Way Gaming. Cannot push them enough, and they're fantastic lineups. But with all of that out of the way, my guest tonight, Benjamin Hunting. Benjamin, thank you so much for coming on tonight. Thank you so much for sharing this very interesting story that you have to tell.
Thanks for having me on and give me the time to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Definitely here to always try to help other creators, other creatives like us, try to lift them up, try to show off what we can with what platforms we have. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about this book that you're working on, this story that you have cooked up in that fascinating brain of yours? Because I read the synopsis and I was like, okay, I'm immediately sold.
Well, it's kind of you to say that. The book's called Model UN, and we're running a Kickstarter the first week of, I guess it's the end of the first week of October, so October 7th at modeluncomic.com. And the gist of it is, it's the mid 90s, and there's a group of high school students who have a Model UN club, and it's just a bunch of misfits and the kind of people who are, some of them are there because they're super keen about the idea, some of them are there because they need the credit, and some of them are just going with the flow. It's one of those fun situations where you get to put a number of different personalities in the same room and then shake it up. And the way I decided to shake up the room was by having aliens show up on Earth and mistake this Model UN club for the real United Nations. And of course, these kids are not prepared for this, right? They're like 17, 18 years old. They're getting ready to graduate. But the leader of the aliens is a little obstinate, a little pigheaded, a little unwilling to admit that they're wrong. And so when they're told, hey, maybe you should contact the actual leaders of the free world, the aliens, the leader just refuses. They're like, no, I did all the research. I set everything up. This is how it's supposed to go. And I'm not backing down. You have 48 hours to decide the fate of your planet. So it's a lot of pressure when you're a teenager, I think, to be put in that situation.
Yeah, just a little bit, just a little bit of pressure of, hey, time to decide the world. I mean, calling a little bit far back. I know I look young, but I don't feel it.
Me neither.
I know when I was in high school, we did a simulated like presidential run where
Okay.
like different students ran for president,
That
and
must have been
like
really intense.
it was interesting. It was very interesting because like you had like legit real life topics. It wasn't like, oh, the student council president and you want to get better lunches for school. It's like, hey, you're 17. How are you going to solve the energy crisis? This seems to work. And so I can only imagine me and my dumb friends trying to run for president and then aliens showing up going, which one of you's the leader?
Yeah.
Uh,
That was one of the fun things about this story was, sometimes when you're in a situation, the people who are the leaders or ostensibly the leaders of a group, when they're put into a high pressure situation, suddenly discover that maybe they're not. And other people and other personalities step forward and it's unexpected. It's not necessarily something that you might have thought was in your character, and you're thrust into a situation that brings that out of you. And that was something fun that I got to play around with this book as well. It's science fiction is something I've always loved, but what really sci-fi lets us do, and everyone knows this, is look at ourselves from a different angle. So putting these kids in this situation, I get to look at things like hierarchy. I went to a private school. I was expelled from public school when I was a teenager, and I live in Quebec, and there's not many options for English language education. Most people
hmm.
speak French here, so I had to go to this the only other school in my area, and it was a small private school, and I got in as a scholarship student, and it was modeled after the whole British boys' school thing, even though it was
Mm.
mixed gender. So I don't know what that was about, but in any case, I had a horrible time there, and I was like, how can I take these 3 years of misery and make something funny out of it? And that was me pushing into Model UN as well. Like all the absurdities I encountered when I was up against this hierarchy, and I can do it on the school side, and then I can do it on the alien side and kind of let them fight it out. So, lemonade out of lemons, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. So I mean you can kind of see I've got a thing for sci-fi. This is a Warhammer banner up here. I kind of literally wear my nerdiness on my sleeve. So I love to ask these questions. Where did you get your start? How did you just wake up one day and you're like, I'm gonna write this book, or has this been like a working project for a while? Like where did you get your start kind of in writing and then where this all began?
Well, there's a couple ways to answer that question. In my day job, I'm a pro writer.
Okay.
I've been freelancing mostly automotive and technology writing for 18 years now. And I in 2019 actually, I had an idea for another book that I wrote called Code 45, which I collaborated on with Angela Hodge and artist Joe Ing. It was eventually published by Scout Comics, and anyone out there listening, don't publish anything with Scout Comics. It's a terrible situation. Word of warning. But anyway, the book was published. We got a trade out there. It all happened, and I'd always wanted to. I'd written an actual novel, like an actual novel, a non-graphic novel in the past,
Hmm.
but I'd had these story ideas that I felt were just much better in a visual format. And so that's what pushed me to do the first graphic novel. And then with the same collaborators, we started a second series called Dead Air, but there were some health issues for my artist, the artist I was working with, sorry, and it kind of got put on hiatus. So I had some time on my hands. This is a very long answer.
Oh no,
Um,
you're good. You're good.
and during that period, I was thinking a lot about just the idea of Model UN. These two words in my head, and I was like, that sounds like I never got to do that. Like, we didn't have the presidential election or prime
Mhm.
ministerial election thing in my high school. We didn't have a Model UN, but it always seemed cool. And I felt like I missed out on it. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe this is a way to create kind of like a Freaks and Geeks style slice of life
Yeah.
story where I'm just like, these kids go to this Model UN club a couple times a week, and it's the focal point of their lives, and we get to find out about them. And I was talking to uh, my previous collaborator, Joe, and he didn't seem super into it. And I was like, I was kind of bummed by it, but then I started thinking, maybe there is an element missing. Maybe there's something that I can bring to this that would like not just make it slice of life, but kind of give it a hook or
Mm.
something that's weird that like I haven't seen before. And then I was like, what about aliens? Like, aliens just show up. And so I called Joe up and I'm like, hey, so remember that idea I was talking about? Well, what if I do the slice of life comic, or what if I do like an alien invasion type comic? And Joe's like, oh, definitely the aliens. That's way better, 100%. Like, just like completely crapping over the original idea. But he was right. And from there, I reached out to so Joe was unavailable, and at the same time, Joe's more of a traditional comic book artist in the sense that
Mm.
he's worked on GI Joe, Street Fighter, Transformers, so he is very in the Western style. But I felt like this kind of story was a black and white manga style of
Mm.
book, and it was weird that I felt that way because I'm not a huge manga fan. Like, I read it from time to time, but the framework of manga just seemed like a good fit for these kids in school. And the alien part, like, there's no way you can come up with a manga that's anything better than anyone else has already done for high school kids. Like, that's the ground zero for like super popular manga, right? So
Right.
with the alien twist on it, I figured I had a chance to catch some people's attention and kind of draw them in and like get them to meet the characters and get them interested in the story. So that's kind of how it came about. And I reached out on Facebook. I was looking for a new artist, someone to
Mm.
collaborate with, and there's a few Facebook groups out there where you can connect with other artists. And I didn't know anyone who did manga, and I asked a lot of artist friends, and they didn't really have any connections either. So I was casting out, into the ocean and being like, ooh, a lot of portfolios to look at and see who I kind of jive with. And I met IE Santiana Hernandez, who's an artist who lives in Argentina, and he had a really cool portfolio that had two things that really pulled me in. The first was he was really great at drawing sci-fi in the sense that, spaceships, corridors, technology, but he could also create characters whose faces were really expressive, and
Mm.
and it felt like I could tell what they were thinking just based on like a silent panel. And I had discovered that those two qualities don't often go together. Like, sometimes your strength is one and sometimes your strength is the other, but he had this ability to combine them. So we hooked up, and he had some really fantastic creative ideas to go with the first parts of the script that I had sent him, and it became a collaborative effort together.
Very cool. No, I know a handful of artists. No, none of them big name. I'm not like trying to like gloat or anything. But
It's okay.
I know a handful of artists that like okay, here's their bread and butter. Like I know some people they can draw big elaborate backgrounds and they can draw like you said, they can draw like a really detailed spaceship, but if you tell them to draw a person, they are gonna stare at you blankly. And then other people that can draw like the perfect like animated person, but that's about as far as their artistic abilities go. So to find someone that can kind of do both is impressive to say the least.
I It was great too because I mean, when you're talking about aliens, they can look however you want them to look, right?
Mm.
And when I came to Santiana Hernandez with the script, I did not have a firm idea of how I wanted them to look. And I've learned, I've only, this is only the third book I've written and co-created. And one of the most important lessons I learned from working with Joe was that the artist is the pro when it comes to visualization. And I think, as a writer and someone who, loves comics and loves cinema and all these visual arts, obviously I have ideas and I have inspirations. But in terms of implementing that, it's really an artist who can take those ideas and make them into something unique and interesting, and it works on the page in a way that I often would not have considered. So IE was able to do that. Like, he was able to come up with ideas for how the aliens should look, how they should interact. Without getting too spoilery, he came up with some really interesting ways of presenting them when they're on their own ship versus how they interact with humans that I hadn't really considered, and really helped move the story forward and change some things for me. So that's one of the coolest things about collaborating is your brain gets like 100% bigger because
Oh
there's like
yeah.
another brain right beside you. And that it's such a gift, let alone having a bigger brain, just having a brain that looks at things in a different way.
Oh yeah. No, 100%. I can 1000% vouch for that. I know that because they'll listen to this eventually. Uh I have three creative directors for the
Okay.
show. I have my best friend who's basically my older brother Tim. I have Cody who is one of the DMs for our D&D games. He's actually running the sci-fi game right now. And then Lee who has been one of the players for our D&D games in the past and is now part of the sci-fi game. But Lee is working on their own graphic novel. So to have, and then Tim, outside of being a DM for our show, as far as D&D, he's also a voice actor.
Okay.
So to have, well, voice actor, and he's working on a book of his own. So to have four brains that aren't just mine, that aren't just focused on the things that I get wrapped up in,
Yeah.
is like leaps and bounds of where I was roughly a year ago with the show. Um, and I can 100% vouch for like the collaborative process and how much these three really just like help me keep this keep this show afloat, and B help me expand past the very, I don't want to call it narrow scope, but the smaller scope that I had
Yeah.
with just me.
Yeah. And it's you know if you're doing it right when you're creating something, it's not just the people that you're working with directly in the creative process who can give you that kind of input as well. I mean, on a show like yours, I have a automotive podcast I've been running for like 9-10 years, right? The listeners are an important force, people who reach out, who have ideas or just things that they want to talk about. But in a book format, the editors that I've worked with have all been amazing. And I've been really lucky as a freelancer. One of the things that I value the most is working with a good team on the other side, a good editorial team, someone who or someone's usually who understand the direction their publication's going, the viewpoint that it has, who the readers are, and how you want to interact with those readers. And expanding that to comic books, having an editor like on this book, I have an editor working with an editor named Kevin Bircher, and he's worked with me on a few other projects. And he pointed out early on in the process, I had like the first issue or first half of the story is
Mhm.
about 55 pages. And in the first 30 pages that I had sent him, there was a section of like 5 or 6 pages that I was really proud of that
Mhm.
explained why the aliens were on Earth. Like, it went into detail, and it was like all it wrapped up nicely, and it was cute and had funny parts, and I thought it was great. And I get the script back from him, and he's like, this section needs to go. This whole thing. He's like, I'm like, really? Because I loved it.
Mhm.
And his arguments were, look, it the at this point in the story, the audience doesn't really care why the aliens are there. The students shouldn't care why the aliens are there. The important thing is they're there. They're a ticking clock. You got to figure out what's going on. What takes the story to the next part of the story, not why we got to this part of the story. And I
Mhm.
hadn't thought of it that way. And I just gotten so focused on like, oh, it's fun. Like, I can have a whole logical reason as to why this is happening. Sometimes the best stories, it doesn't matter why they're happening. What's interesting is the story itself. And I had lost
Mhm.
sight of that. And it took Kevin completely coming in cold and being like, I was with you until this 5 page stretch that just killed the energy of the story. And
Hmm.
like, just get rid of it. You don't need it. So it's super helpful.
No, like I get that, and it's interesting that you say that because spoilers for anyone watching. Uh I just went and saw the Demon Slayer Infinite Castle movie.
Okay.
It literally dropped Thursday, so we're recording it on Monday. This movie dropped Thursday. And my number one complaint with it was the fact that there's multiple scenes in the movie where it will just pause mid-fight and go into a character's background
Yeah.
and then jump back into the fight. And I was like, you didn't have to do all that. Like it's cool to know this character's background and find a place to put it in there, but mid swing was not the correct time to bring this up.
Like, where does that energy go, right?
Yeah.
Where does the intensity of that scene go when you do something like that? For sure. Yeah.
And so I get so having someone that catches that and kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of gets you out of your own head,
For
where
sure.
it's like, hey, have you thought about doing it like this? And I'm like, no, I didn't. That's genius. Thank you
that's
for
what
pointing out the
that's what
obvious.
writing is, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're stuck in your own head. And like,
Hmm.
I think that the cliche is that writers are sitting in front of a keyboard and like waiting for everything to happen. But in reality, writing happens all the time when you're doing other things. And
Hmm.
because of that, the nature of that creative process, you are in your own head and you can't really externalize it. So the externalization of the process is what ends up on the page, and that's, you have to hope that that will connect with other people on your team in such a way that they can improve it, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, I get that. It's actually hilarious because I DM a D&D game on Wednesdays, and I am I when I first started, I would sit down and I would look down in my notebook and I was like, all right, cool, I'm gonna write all these things out and I'm gonna have all this stuff planned for my session and I'm gonna have all this like detailed, notes taken and ready. And then an hour later, I look down at the notepad and it just says the. And then I started just like you said, it happens outside of writing. So then I'm just, I'm at work and I'm walking from one job to another and I go, well, what if this happened? Or what if that happened? What if I did this next week?
Yeah.
And then I get back and I write down two or three notes and I write down some names that'll be important because I'll forget them later. And then that's all I'll have. And that turns out to be like the best session that I run is just, all right, here's the little bit of details. Here's that one idea that I got driving in the car, or I got listening to music while I cleaned the house and it just clicked.
For me, it's the shower.
Yes.
It's, I think it's because you're not focused on anything. You're just
Yeah.
in there, the water's hitting you. There's no visual stimulus, there's no
Hmm.
audio stimulus. And I think it clears part of my brain for all the thoughts that have been percolating to just push to the front. And then I'm like, uh-oh, I need a pen and paper, but I'm soaking wet. So then I have to try to remember it until I get out of the shower. Sometimes too, at the very end of the day, when I'm in bed and I'm reading, or I'm about to start
Hmm.
reading, it's the same thing. I think I'm tired to the point where active thought has dissipated and that those subconscious processes can push forward. It's like, I
Hmm.
think it's being in like a distraction free environment, or in a time period where you're no longer focused on anything else. That
Hmm.
seems to help me.
For me, I think it's always like in the car if I'm
Mm.
driving somewhere because it's the monotonous,
Yeah.
you drive this road every morning.
It's robotic.
Yeah, it's almost what do they call it? The highway hypnosis where you just focused on nothing and
Yeah.
you're like, okay, cool, get in the lane. But then, you're listening to a song or it's early and just something clicks and you're like, oh, there it is. I know for me, one of my favorite moments is I found a way to incorporate an idea and I'm not going to give away spoilers because my players watch my interviews,
But they
but I
got
had this
notepads out
I
right now.
yeah, exactly. They're like, "Aha, there it is." Um, but I had this idea of how to incorporate a song that I listen to, and that song is very much based on a real historical event. And I was like, I want to find a way to get this into a D&D game one day because it would be so fascinating for them to run into this. And I'm just driving along one day and it clicked and I literally shouted, I got it, like as loud as I could. And it scared the hell out of my girlfriend who's sitting in the front seat with me. And she's like, what? And I was like, I just figured something out. It took me 3 months, but I got it. And it clicked.
It's a good
And
feeling.
it was amazing. So I can't imagine what it would be like to get uh an idea on paper on a book in front of in front of an audience, uh but to have a moment like that where it's like, oh, this is the perfect time to uh to, to get this idea that I've been struggling with, boom, onto the page, and just it works.
It's taught me to be gentle with my brain because
Mm,
like sometimes so the book is done, it's complete, it's illustrated, lettered, everything. I like to, as much as I can, go into a Kickstarter with a completed book, but I have the second half to write, right?
mm,
And so I've started it and I've outlined it, but it's not, the bones are there,
mm,
but it's not something that is entertaining yet, or
mm,
and I don't have a full conclusion for it yet, like it's going in the right direction, but there's no need for me to be doing that right now, you know what I mean? Like there's
mm,
I sometimes feel the pressure where it's like, okay, you got the first half done, you're really happy with it, everything has clicked, it's on the page, it's illustrated, now's the time to dive in while the iron is hot and like keep going. But it
mm.
assumes that your brain is like some kind of infinite resource where it's like once it's warmed up, you're going to keep going. That's not how
Mm.
brains work, man. It's not like you run a marathon and then at the end of the marathon you're like, all right, your body's warmed up, time for marathon 2, and you're like, whoa, wait a minute, I didn't train for marathon 2. But you can put a lot of pressure on yourself that way. So I realized that, like, the Kickstarter is 30 days, and since it's I'm doing digital only, it's going to be fulfilled right away, and then I have
Mm.
like a few months at least to get the second part done, finished, completed with no pressure, and to do the best possible job I can. So it's like trying to take that temptation away to just
Hmm.
have your foot to the floor all the time, which is terrible.
Yeah, no, and I discussed it in my last interview, because 100% I try very strongly to be a advocate. That's the word I was looking for. An advocate for mental health and mental health
Yeah,
awareness. And burnout's real,
it's
and
super real.
burnout sucks. So to just let yourself be like, okay, I finished this thing, I finished this book, I finished this project. Now I can sit and breathe.
Yeah,
And I don't I used this phrase a long time ago to kind of describe life, where for so long, at least my life and my brother's life, it was kicking and pedaling as hard as we could to like not drown in the ocean. And then the second we got to calm waters and the second life started to calm down, we're still flailing and scrambling to keep our heads above water. And we both realized that's not swimming. That's just not drowning.
yeah, that's a really great way of putting it. Just not drowning. It's there's We're so conditioned to constantly be in motion, right?
Mhm.
And I mean, I've thought about this a lot. I went through some burnout when when COVID hit in
Mm.
2020. In March was my very first Kickstarter.
Mhm.
Like the week after everything started shutting down, we did okay, but I pushed really hard to get on the second issue of that particular book that summer,
Yeah.
and I got to about August, and I had been not only, working hard on getting this second book created and done, but I was also working as much of a full time as I could, freelancing with
Mm.
the world kind of spinning its wheels as a writer. And I was worried every second of every moment that, my family was going to die. like,
Yeah.
and all of these things, they piled up on me. And I didn't realize how much it was affecting me until I started making mistakes professionally
Mm.
with clients. And I couldn't see, like, I would do something. I was writing something and it wasn't right. And I couldn't see that it wasn't right. And I had to have a conversation with someone I was working with on it. And they had to point out to me, hey, like, what are you doing here? Like, this isn't you. This doesn't make sense. And at that point, I realized I was at the point where I could not adequately evaluate my own work anymore, or
Mm.
what I was doing professionally. And it was a real slap in the face. And it was like, wow, I've hit burnout. I've like achieved a point where
Hmm.
I'm completely saturated. And I pulled back from like 60% of the work I was doing immediately. But it's not a linear process, right? Like, you got to give yourself time after that. It's not like,
Hmm.
okay, I'm going to stop working for a week or so and then I'll be okay. No, it's about like remanaging your time, finding a new balance for yourself moving forward under the stress of the pandemic. Not really easy to do.
Yeah.
But it was such a wake up call. Like, and it really changed how I approached the work I was doing and what things were sustainable and what weren't, and learning to
Hmm.
recognize that. Um, but it's hard because, like, hustle culture and just consumerism in general and capitalism in general is like, you need to be on 24/7, because if you're not, someone else who is going to take your place. And then you
Yeah.
start to interrogate that belief, and it's like, well, take my place, what does that even mean? Like, where am I? Like,
Right.
they're gonna, who is it that's going to replicate what I do? And obviously there's no one who can replicate what each of us individually does, in our
Mm.
niche. So learning to move past that kind of fear, I think, is also helpful in dealing with burnout, and not buying into the idea that we're all, infinite resources that never needs to be replenished.
No, I get that 100%. I was dealing with some medical issues at the end of last year, and I literally, this is hindsight talking because I was
Mm.
not very forgiving of myself. Uh, I literally spent a night in the ER. I had some horrible neck pain and a pinched nerve that was
Oof,
just like this entire arm was just on fire,
that sucks.
and it was awful. However, I didn't let myself rest. I didn't let myself
No.
breathe. So what did I do? I went, I got out Friday night. Like Friday afternoon, they're like, okay, you should be fine to go home. Your pain is managed. Cool. Time to go home and rest. Nope. Time to go to the convention Saturday and Sunday that I promised I would do press for. And I ran around with a microphone Saturday. And some of those interviews are good. I was proud that I got them. But at other times, like none of my interviews from Sunday are literally watchable
Wow.
because you can see me doing this the whole time because my arm's in pain and I was an idiot.
Yeah, it's the same.
So,
That's exactly the same thing I was doing with my brain. It was like, I'm going through the motions of something that feels like it's working, but later on you realize it wasn't.
yeah.
And in that moment, you're just lost to it. You're too deep under the waves to figure it out for yourself.
And so getting to, take a little bit of time off, a little bit of rest, you know, allowing myself to, sit back and go, all right, I'm allowed to catch my breath. I'm allowed to be injured. And I eventually got better. I'm eventually rolling with interviews again. And now if I go to a con, well, I mean, the nerve pain's gone, but like I go to a con and I'm rolling on a much different energy and a much better pace.
Yeah,
So,
that's great to hear.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
So
it's tough. And you said, I mean, I don't know how old you are, but you were like saying, I don't feel young anymore. So I I think that the problem with so many habits that we develop in life is that they're developed when we're very young.
Hmm.
And when we have like unbridled energy and crazy metabolisms and the ability to function on very low amounts of sleep. And
Hmm.
then there's the, not necessarily a temptation, but just the normalization. You project that forward for the rest of your life. And I think sometimes you get clues that it's, you don't have that endurance anymore or whatever you want to call it. But sometimes you just hit a cliff
Oh yeah.
or you go off a cliff or you hit a wall, and it's very stark and you're like, wow, I can't stay up till 4 a.m. doing whatever it is I used to do anymore and
Yep.
expect the next day to be usable in any way.
Hmm.
And it's like that for concentration too. It's like I used to, when I first started freelance writing, I was working as a consultant during the day and I was writing at night and I was pitching clients and whatnot. I did that for like 6 months. And then I went full time after that. But I would say I was probably between pitching and writing, I was in front of my computer from like 8 a.m. to like 7, 8 p.m. at night, probably 6, 7 days a week. And that worked at that age. I was in my late 20s when I started doing that.
Mm.
But after a certain number of years, I realized that the writing I was doing at night, the quality was lower. It would take me longer to get to the same results that I had had during the day or that I had had years ago at that same kind of evening writing. And I had to draw a line for myself. I'm like, you don't write past like 6 p.m. anymore. I mean, it's
Mm.
just not going to be good. Like, don't do it. You're just pushing a boulder that's rolling back on top of you. Like,
Right.
and then I realized I couldn't work 7 days in a row without at least one day off. Or like, and it's weird because, oh, work, you're writing. Like, how hard is that really? But it was like a brain mush thing.
Hmm.
Even if I was only doing like an hour on a Saturday and an hour on a Sunday, by the time Monday came around, I just hadn't stopped.
Hmm.
So I would try to push past that hour and do a full work day. My brain was like, "No, nah, I'm just tired of this. I'm done. Like, this is going to be an awful day for you. So buckle in. You're
Yeah.
gonna take 5 hours to do something it should have taken you a half hour to do." So yeah, it's like understanding our limits as we age and get old and weird. Like it's tough.
No, understandable. So, but I would like to circle back to the book.
Okay.
You brought up the science fiction. You brought up that you loved sci-fi growing up and getting into writing. What are some of I mean, everyone knows mine at this point if you're not paying attention, you know. But like what are some of the sci-fis that really inspired you growing up and that really like hooked you into writing?
Uh Definitely the Star Trek movies,
Hmm.
the classic Trek, but the movie versions of that.
Yeah.
I was obsessed with that when I was a kid in the 80s and a teenager in the 90s, right? So I loved it. I ended up reading a ton of the pocketbooks that came out for Star
Mhm.
Trek for that era. I think they, by the time I stopped reading them, I think they were up into like the 80s. The number of books they had, it was a sequential, and it was fun because like back then Star Trek was pretty loose about what canon was, and they were really
Mhm.
cool about letting individual authors just add to the universe. And it was not nearly as controlled as, Star Wars was kind of similar at that time, I think.
Mhm.
And then they all got wiped out, right? Like Lucasfilm or Disney, I can't remember who came in and said, okay, all this stuff is just lore now. It's not actually official. Star Trek never did that. They were just like,
Mhm.
whatever. And it's funny because I didn't know it at the time. I came to comics late in life. Like I got really
Mhm.
into, I read like Sunday comics when I was growing up.
Mhm.
I loved that Berkeley Breathed and Bill Watterson and Charles Schultz and all those Doonesbury, all that stuff. I absolutely adored it. Archie and Betty and Veronica, all that. I had a babysitter who would bring Archie over, and I got obsessed that way. Like, cause here's something new to read because I was just reading all the time. But when I got older, I never really fell into like superhero stuff.
Mhm.
Um, I just hadn't been really exposed to it. So in my early 30s, there was I moved into a neighborhood where a new comic book store had opened like literally a few blocks away, and it was going to that store and Crossover Comics in Montreal, and talking with the staff there who all became friends. They really are responsible for me, being on the path I am now with comics. But all this to say, I didn't know in the 80s that there was a Star Trek comic book series that had, it was so crazy because they were writing it in between the movies, but
Mhm.
Paramount told them nothing. They had no idea what was coming down the pipe. So they would create like a dozen issues or maybe like 20 issues sometimes, building up these stories and using the previous movie as their launch pad. And then the movie would come out and it would have nothing to do with anything they wrote, of course. And they'd have to do this reset. And so you'd have these like two. I bought like the first two series on eBay a couple years ago, and I've been reading them like now with the
Hmm.
benefit of hindsight and like trying to understand what they must have been dealing with creatively, because they'd get like two or three issues to reset everything and figure out how they can make it fit. And then the next movie would come along, and oh man, it must have been really frustrating. And they clearly had also no real guidance on who the
Hmm.
characters were or how they should act. And it's kind of strange. Just it's like an artifact frozen in amber from that period. That's just weird, but it's official. It's out there. So yeah, long-winded answer. Definitely Star Trek. Tons.
Okay.
I
No,
was
that's,
obsessive about it.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's an excellent series to be obsessed with. Top tier quality right there. Um, you brought up something interesting, and I want to kind of get your opinion on it. I don't know how much you've written outside of this. We did a D&D game back in, oh my goodness, what month was it? April. There we go. Almost forgot. Almost forgot. We started right at the end of March, beginning of April, and it was a Lord of the Rings game.
Okay.
And so we were all super excited to play in Tolkien's world because we're all massive nerds. And then we get like two or three sessions in, and no offense to the game because we had a great time and we still love Tolkien lore, but like we realized we were so limited on what we could play with
Mm.
because Tolkien went so far back on his history. Like, we would love to be the son of so and so. And then you go into the books and it's like, oh no, he died without ever being married. And you're like, crap, well, I guess I'll be that. And so, like, it was such an interesting experience, basically going from, our regular D&D games, which is just the mind of a crazy person, aka my brother, and this expansive sandbox that whatever we wanted to throw in it, we could, into all right, here are your colors that you have to draw inside of. And it was such it was a fascinating, but also at sometimes frustrating creative adventure. So I can only imagine what your authors were working with as far as trying to write inside the lines of, hey, here's what the movie's doing. Okay, now you have to fix what you did because this is what the movie did.
Yeah. It's funny because like I think that I was always writing when I was younger, like as a
Mhm.
kid, fiction and whatnot, just usually just for myself, sometimes for school, or there
Mhm.
was some cool some cool like writers retreat stuff I got to do when I was through the schools I was in when I was younger. But I never really wrote fan fiction. Like I
Mhm.
remember when I was a kid, I would act out Star Trek and whatnot
Right.
with friends and whatever, or I would try to like I would try to recruit people who weren't really into Star Trek to be part of what I was doing, which is like wild to think about now. But back
Right.
then, when you're a kid, you're just like, of course, I enjoy this, so everyone would enjoy this like rigid space military hierarchy that I think we should inhabit in our playtime. But I never really wrote fan fiction, and I wonder if
Mhm.
it's because I sensed those limitations. Because
Mhm.
I think when I outgrew playing in the Star Trek world, I grew into enjoying what other people had done with it. And then the worlds that I wanted to play in were the ones that I had going in my mind, right?
Mhm.
And like you said, you can do so much more. You can do whatever you want. That's the coolest thing about comics is like you have no budget. You have an unlimited budget for special effects,
Yep.
and you can have a cast of millions if you really want to frustrate your readers. You can have a series that goes on for 39 years. Do whatever you want, And that's something that I don't think really exists in any other visual art form, at least not a pop visual art form.
Mhm.
Television and film, they're limited not just by budget but by attention span.
Mhm.
And like comics, you can pick them up, put them down, pick it up 2 days later and resume where you were. And I think if you forget something, you flip back a couple pages. But I think very few people watch a movie over the course of a week, maybe a couple
Right.
nights, but not like you're not stopping after 40 minutes, 2 days
Hmm.
later coming back, rewinding 15 minutes, watching that again. Like that feels like a hassle, you know? So
Hmm.
comics is just an interesting way to engage with people with virtually no limitations on what you can do. And I'm really glad that like when I decided to write that first book, Code 45, that I decided to go with a visual medium like comics because I was excited about it, even though I'd never done it before. Like I had
Hmm.
zero experience. Joe had been a pro comic book artist for years, and I was able to basically go to comic book college by partnering with him and just like understanding how visual storytelling works, but also the language of comics, which is quite different from film, which I had a
Yeah.
background in. And I had to learn those differences, especially with like how time passes and whatnot, and how you guide the reader's eye on a page, and how much information you can put into a small space, and leaving room for action, leaving room for dialogue. I didn't know any of that stuff. Like I was reading it all the time, and you absorb some of it, but to have someone like him alongside me, like guiding me, and then again, that goes into the whole learning how to trust an artist, um, in learning how to trust an artist's ability to tell your story, or actually to tell the story you're both telling, which is a more accurate way to put it. It was all stemming from that experience.
No, absolutely. I wish, I really wish I was able to learn uh from streaming and from like a podcasting. We won't call it an expert, but someone who had been there before,
Like a
to
mentor of some
like a
kind, right?
mentor, because
Yeah.
I kind of got into this all by myself, all on the all just uh I think the closest thing I had was a buddy of mine who already had a successful show, and I would ask him questions every now and again, be like, "Hey, I'm struggling with this. Like, what do you do in this instance?" But it was never him watching the show and be like, "All right, you need to fix this. You need to pay attention here. Try doing this instead." I just had to trial by fire, learn what worked and learn what didn't, and by some miracle, once again, I try to stay as humble as I can, but by some miracle, it's worked. I've gotten some crazy interviews that I didn't think I would get, nor do I still believe that I deserve. But here we are anyway. It's happened anyway.
That's the cool
So,
thing about doing things that are outside of your comfort zone. You can't predict what's going to happen, right?
yeah, that is an understatement to say the least. And I think to just like to double down on your mentorship comment, uh and then I'm also people who watch the show know I haven't been able to tell you, I'm also a pro wrestler on the side,
Nice.
uh and so I've gotten to I've gotten to be mentored by people that I've really respected and learned from, and now I'm helping with a school here in DFW. I'm never going to claim that they're my students because I'm not the head trainer. I'm just there to help when I can. But for them to have people willing to show them, hey, here's where I made mistakes, here's where you can do better, will cut so much, we'll call it strife, out of their path.
For
It
sure.
it will magnify what they can do so much quicker, and they will get it so much faster. And I've noticed that because a couple of them are almost ready to like debut, they're almost ready to graduate, and they are all doing it faster than I did it back in the day. And so it's like it's almost I don't want to use the word vindication, but it's almost vindication
It's your
of
gift. It's your gift to the sport.
yeah.
It's what you give back after what it's given to you, you know? Like and it's amazing to be able to see that implemented in front of you in real time, and like see, I think seeing people grow is like,
Mhm.
what better feeling is that, you know? Like it's funny though, my grandfather was a occasional wrestling promoter up here in Quebec in
Really?
the 60s. Yeah.
Wow.
I didn't know this until one day I was watching. it was like an ad for like a WWF retrospective,
Hmm.
and my mom's like, "Oh, I knew Andre the Giant," and I'm like, "Excuse me?" And
You
this is like
what?
this is probably like late '90s or something.
Uh-huh.
And she's like, "Yeah, he used to come up and wrestle for my dad, and when he was Giant Jean Rousseau back then."
Wow.
And he would come over and we'd all hang out, and he was very polite, gentle man, and my grandfather really liked having him come up to the promotion, and really easy to work with. And it's just so surreal, like
Yeah.
my mom has never spoken about wrestling in my entire life, and like now it's like, oh yeah, by the way.
Yeah.
So
No,
weird stuff like that from the past.
it's hilarious. I love telling this story. So, for like my teenage years when I really got into wrestling, my dad told me the story that or at least he told me that once a long time ago, my uncle partied with Dr. Death Steve Williams. And I was like, "Oh, that's so cool." Well, then I started doing the math in my head. He was stationed in Japan in
Okay.
1993. If he partied with Dr. Death Steve Williams in 1983, that means he met him at the pinnacle of his career. Like when he is the most popular wrestler, well, the least popular because he's a bad guy, but he was like one of the most famous wrestlers in all of Japan, and you just so happened to meet him one day at the height of his power. I need to hear the whole story. So it's just wild the things that that can happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny like how for the person telling you that story, like it's just
Mhm.
part of their life.
Yeah.
It's like not something that they think of twice. That's their lived experience. But to you, it's like being slapped in the face with the coldest of water. You're
Oh yeah.
like,
Just like, yeah, you met the most famous person in a country. Congrats. React to it, please. Have Now I've got to ask, has creating ever got you to connect with someone, um, whether it be a mentor, whether it be someone you looked up to, but someone that you never thought you'd get a chance to even meet, let alone connect with?
yeah, definitely. So as I mentioned, like my quote unquote day job, although it's not really a job, is automotive writing.
Mm,
And now I write for the magazines and newspapers I read when I was a kid.
mm. That's
And that
awesome.
that in itself is surreal, and it's not something I ever planned on. It's just something that happened, which makes it even more surreal.
Right.
But to answer your question specifically, the in automotive journalism, there can be a lot of travel. You go around the world to. It's easier to bring people to where the cars are than to bring cars to where the people
Right.
are.
Right.
So you end up traveling with a fairly small group of people. Like in Canada, there's maybe 100 people who do automotive journalism on a regular basis. The US, obviously, way bigger population, it's larger. Uh, but I ended up suddenly, the people that I had watched on TV when I was like, 13, 14 are my colleagues. And they're talking
Mhm.
to me about stuff that I've written. And I'm just like, jaw hanging, like trying to like so I don't look like a doofus. That was when that started happening. When you become when people that you had perceived as being like mentors in a field are treating you like a peer,
Yeah.
and you're meeting them on that level, that's it's a really unique experience, I think. And I'm sure you've had that happen in wrestling.
I I've had it happen both in wrestling and in podcasting.
Mm.
And I still don't get it. I
Yeah,
still don't understand it.
because it doesn't change in your mind, right? Like, because you're still interacting with them, you still see them how you've always seen
Mhm.
them. They're seeing you. They didn't see you as a kid.
Yeah,
you know
no.
they didn't see you when you were starting out. They see you now as a professional, and that's how they entered the relationship with you. But you have
Mhm.
baggage that you bring into the
Yeah.
relationship, and so like you can manage it for sure, and it's not a problem. But it
Mhm.
is it is different. and
Oh, absolutely.
and it can be fascinating, and it never gets old, like being able to just talk to these people that you really respect and be like, wow, I get to hear this person's unvarnished opinion on something. I get to
Right.
I get to hear how their mind works. We get to have casual conversations about the world. I get to hear their experiences, their stories, that the stuff that they don't put on the page or
Yeah.
don't bring into the ring or don't broadcast. It's amazing.
The best, well, let me start off with there's a lot of best ones because oh my goodness, I could host an entire show on just the people I've met. But the most recent one, because I literally saw him Saturday, is I got to meet this is about 2 years ago. I got to meet a voice actor who voiced a character from a video game, which is hands down top five, one of my favorite video games of all time. I don't have, no, it's in the other room. So I got to, the video game is Borderlands.
Okay.
Borderlands 2 is top five, one of my favorite games all time, bar none. I got to meet probably my favorite character from Borderlands. And I got to meet him. I got to do an interview with him, and it was awesome. And then we just kept talking and we
Oh, wow.
kept interacting. And I literally saw him Saturday. I didn't tell him I was coming to an event that he was at. He saw me, he got up and gave me like a giant hug, like we're best friends. And to say that I am friends with someone who voiced one of my favorite video game characters is mind blowing. And I still don't understand how I got here.
And isn't it so rewarding when people are who you wanted them to be?
Oh, yeah.
When you don't have to like have an asterisk after you met someone that you really respected. Like that's a great feeling too.
Oh, yeah. And because he might watch this later, shout out to Marcus, aka Brick. Um, that's an awesome dude. But just like you said, to have met certain people is one thing. To have them continue to affiliate with you, actually, a hilarious story from my creative director is I got to interview. His name's Rhett Fisher. He was one of the Power Rangers.
Okay.
He was from a later season that he ended up being like the sixth Ranger in the show and coming in later and doing his whole deal. And so I got to interview him for about 5 minutes once at a con. Then he agreed later on down the line to sit down with me and do an interview like this for about an hour. And during the interview, he's like, "Yeah, we met, we became friends. Like he's such a cool guy." And my buddy Cody, my creative director, he texted me and he goes, "So how long is Jay gonna hold over the fact that Rhett said he's friends with him?" And I said, "I'm not because I don't believe it because I still haven't processed this." But it's a fascinating experience to say the least.
Yeah, I mean you're meeting human beings instead of these personalities that we've constructed in our minds, like
Oh
it's
yeah.
yeah.
So, but before we start winding down here, because I've been keeping an eye on the clock, not holding you hostage at the microphone here. Um, what outside of your Model UN story that is about to be or is on Kickstarter currently?
It's about to be so
It's
October
about to be.
7th. Yeah.
It's
Model
about to be on
UN
Kickstarter.
modeluncomic.com takes you there October 7th. You can
Yep.
go there now and it has the sign up page. So if you want to get in on that, but yeah.
Um, so what are some upcoming stories that you'd like to tell without dropping too many bombs, without throwing your ideas out there to be borrowed by other people? Like what are
Oh,
some things that you
I'm never worried about that. I mean, it's like ideas are great, but execution is what makes things happen. So there's a
right.
lot of ideas out there. Um, to be honest, like I just want to finish the book. I just want to
Mhm.
finish Model UN. This was something that I gave myself a bit of a challenge to try and get it done in like 100 to 120 pages in a brand new format I've never worked in before.
Mhm.
So I want to see if I can still do that. I'm halfway there, and I think I might be able to. So it's sometimes when you put limitations on your creativity, it can really amp it up and
Mhm.
make you think of new ways to do things that maybe in the past you would have. if you only have a certain amount of time, you take something that would have been on 5 pages and make it 1 page, and then that gives you more room to do more in your story. Instead of thinking about 100 pages being a limit, it actually becomes a doorway to doing things differently and getting more in the story. So that's kind of where I'm focused. I want to try and get that done and have that out in the world by the spring, I think. So I
Nice.
think that might be realistic. I'm not sure. Um, I also have some screenplay ideas that I'm kind of working on, totally unrelated to comics. That I've never written a screenplay, and I have
Hmm.
a close friend who has, and he's always pushing me to do it. And sometimes that's all it takes is like someone who's like, "Hey, you should do this, you should do this,
Oh
you should
yeah.
do this, you should do this," and like they're right. I should, and I wish we had 36-hour days, and then maybe
Right.
things like that would get done. But it's really just a question of like doing it, and you never find the time, you have to make the time. So that's
Hmm.
probably what I'll do next after Model UN is like start working on some of those ideas. I already have some outlines. um it's so strange to like think of when I write a comic book.
Hmm.
So often what I think of is like, who will I collaborate with? How many pages will this be? Since I fund everything myself, how much is this going to cost to develop? Because at this
Hmm.
point, I've got a pretty good idea of like what art will cost, what design will cost, etc. And like it or not, that's a limiting factor when we bring something into the world, right?
Hmm.
But if I'm writing a movie, I don't have to think about anything like that in the same way because I'm not going to be writing those checks. I mean,
Right.
in an abstract way, I have to be like, well, the studio is not going to pay $100 million on some random idea, right? They're not going to like if your script requires Formula One levels of money to bring to life, it's probably has a pretty weak chance. But at the same time, um, I can just write it and then it's ready to go into the ecosystem of the world. Like
Hmm.
when you write a comic book strip, excuse me, when you write a comic book script, that's just like step two. You
Hmm.
outline, you write it, then it has to be drawn, then it has to be lettered, then it has to be designed, then it has to be printed. There are many, many steps. But like with screenwriting, it's like you write it, the idea is executed, and now it's up to you to get other people interested in the idea. You don't have, there's no
Hmm.
step past that, right? The next steps past that are once you've found the team that you're collaborating with. So anyway,
Right.
spoken like someone who's never written a screenplay. I sound so authoritative about how it works, but yeah.
All right. Well, then we'll be keeping an eye out for that then. I definitely want to hear uh if and when you complete a screenplay, what you write, what you've got in store, because you've got some creative ideas out here that I wouldn't have thought of. And so I'd like to see what you could do with the medium of film. But with that, we'll start winding down here. I always like to say, is there anything you'd like to just say to the internet? Anything you'd like to just put out there into the ether? Um, and then where can the wonderful people of the internet find you?
Sure. Putting stuff out to the ether, I would say that if you want to write comic books or anything else, do it. Just do it. Don't listen to anyone who tells you you can't. Don't listen to anyone who puts barriers up in your way. Anyone who tells you you can't do something creative is just operating out of fear, their own fears, whether they tried something and it didn't work for them, or whether they never tried because they were too afraid of failure. You're going to fail and it's going to be okay because there's always tomorrow. And mistakes are the tuition we pay for success. So it's that I wish more people had pushed me like that when I was younger. I think that writing is such an amazing, it's given me so much in my life. It's given me everything in my life. This roof came from writing. So don't believe anyone who tells you that's not possible. That's where I would go with that. And if you want to find me, benjaminhunting.com is my website. There's a bunch of car stuff, a bunch of comic stuff, a bunch of music stuff. If you want to hear me talk about cars in a podcast, Unnamed Automotive Podcast, yes, it's a terrible name. We weren't thinking 10 years ago when we started it. We got 400 episodes up there for people to check out.
Nice.
And in terms of social media, I'm mostly on Instagram these days because no one's really mean to me there. So at at Hunting Benjamin is the easiest way to find me on there. It's just weird pictures that I take, things I encounter out in the world. So yeah.
All
And of
right.
course, the comic book, modeluncomic.com. Go sign up to be notified from when it goes live, which is October 7th. And it's a huge help if you sign up to be notified because it helps with the Kickstarter algorithm. It honestly truly does. They tell you it does, but they're right. So
Well, hell yeah. Well, Benjamin, thank you so much for sitting down with me tonight. Thank you for sharing this story with me. I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to get my hands on it. It's a fascinating concept that I'd really love to see where you take it.
thank you.
But thank you again for sitting down with me. Thank you for sharing tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Uh, as always, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, go on our Twitch, our YouTube, our Spotify, so you never miss uploads. And like and follow there. I'm gonna try to get this turned around as quick as I can. We've got interviews with the pro wrestler Mason Martin, an old wrestling buddy of mine, that'll be up right before this. So keep an eye out for that. Also, once again, we've got Astromore every Friday, which is our D&D sci-fi adventure. We have a excellent crew of players, and all of their characters are fascinating creatures to say the least. So it's an awesome adventure. It's a great show. We cannot stress enough that this is probably one of our best D&D shows that we've put out. So go check us out every Friday, 7 p.m. well, 7-ish Central Standard Time. And of course, come check us out at FateCon, September 28th in Arlington, Texas. We'll be doing a DMs roundtable panel, myself and the three creative directors, Tim, Lee, and Cody. So we can't wait to see you there. And go follow Benjamin here on Instagram. Go follow Mono UN and sign up for the Kickstarter. This is a fascinating story that like I said, I can't wait to see what he puts out, what happens in this book. So go check that out. Go give him your love and support. He deserves it. He's working hard on it. And if you want part two, you got to support part one.
It's
So
true.
but ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and thank you for stopping Curbside.